in thinking about what scholarship is actually trying to do when I write an article or a book, when you're writing an essay. Some of this isn't going to be, I suspect, isn't going to be that applicable at A-level, or it might be more applicable when you're writing kind of 3,000 or 4,000 word coursework pieces than kind of day-to-day essays. You'll be able to get kind of advice from your teachers. But fundamentally, what we're all trying to do is to do stuff that is original, or in some other sense, new. Let's just get that up there. That can be a really kind of scary concept, but hopefully it makes sense that, I mean, that's the way to make money out of ideas. As an academic, if I want to publish an article, it has to be an article that's doing something different from all the other articles that are out there. Otherwise, why the hell would you read it? Maybe you're going to kind of go to, or finish school, or finish university, and go and work for, I don't know, a mobile phone company, and they'll be like, okay, we need you to kind of help come up with a new kind of mobile phone, or a new advertising scheme, and it's going to have to be different from what's gone before. Or you might have to kind of argue a point, and again, you'll be asked to kind of deal with a problem that's never been dealt with before. Maybe I might be a management consultant and I get parachuted into your school or college to sort it out because your head teacher's rubbish. And I'll have to kind of present a load of options to the governors about, the best way to deal with your head teacher. Maybe they need a pay rise because they're just, underpaid. Maybe they should just be taken out and shot. And I'll have to kind of justify those positions. But either way, I'll be dealing for my job with a new problem, and I'll have to think that through and come out with a kind of new, different solution. So that's fundamentally what we're trying to kind of train you to do in pretty much all of your kind of academic studies. And this is really potentially quite a kind of difficult and scary concept. So we're asking you to produce ideas that are original and new. But it's not enough for your idea to just be different from everyone else's. The kind of analogy I use for this is Vincent van Gogh, famous artist, you might have heard of him. And he spent all his life doing these paintings that were totally different from anything else that anyone had ever done. And he lived in poverty and misery. Why? Because all his friends looked at them and they were just like, those are totally weird, we just don't get what you're doing. So you can be original and still be a kind of complete failure in life. It's really depressing. What you need to be doing is what Van Gogh didn't manage to do, which is to be original in ways that people can understand, in ways that convince people that you're right, in ways that connect with the world they already know, rather than just looking at your work and going, wow, that's just some totally wacky idea that's come out of nowhere. So your ideas, your arguments have to be convincing. And a key way to show they're convincing is to show that your ideas are verifiable by referring to secondary literature. This idea of being verifiable is the idea that I'm reading an article or an essay that you've written, you make some statement of fact. King James came to the throne in this year due to the unification of England and Scotland in his own person, whatever it might be. You might have encountered James I of England when you're doing Shakespeare. Anyway, you'll make a statement about that and I'll be like, well, what if this person's just made it up? And I'm like that with pretty much every sentence I ever read. I'm always checking whether people might have made stuff up, whether they're going to just kind of pull the wool over my eyes. So I always want a nice reference that's going to send me off to somewhere that I actually consider a reliable source that's going to kind of back up that claim. That doesn't have to be a quotation. In fact, I'd rather it wasn't a quotation, but just a reference that says where you got the information from would be great. And then I can follow it up. And that makes everything much more convincing for me. So one way to kind of make original and new ideas work is to relate them to secondary literature by showing that you're building on known facts, known information, reliable material. And like I say, professional academic work will just have those references all over the place, particularly at the beginning, actually, when you're setting your stall. But secondary literature does a lot of other stuff too. It's not just there as a mechanical way for you to kind of demonstrate where your ideas are coming from. And this brings us on to a concept that's potentially quite kind of mind-bending. It might be a bit hard to kind of get used to, but I'll try it out. For me, it's a really important concept. We talk about original ideas and new ideas in schools and universities and out there in businesses and stuff. And it gives you the idea that originality is actually kind of real, that there's an original idea is actually a thing that's a kind of globe out there in space that eventually maybe you'll be able to find and go, wow, I've got an original idea. Actually, original ideas don't work like that at all. Originality is a rhetorical construct. That is to say, we make things original by saying that they're original. You can make your ideas original by convincing your readers that no one's had those ideas before. And this is the other huge and really important use of secondary literature in academic writing. Loads of the time when I'm citing secondary literature, it's not because I'm using it to give me, to back up my claims about facts. It's not because I'm borrowing people's arguments, though I might be doing that at other points as well. The hugely important reason why I use secondary literature is to say, no one's done this before. Look, all these people have done other things. So you might be doing an essay on madness in Hamlet, for example, and you'll be like, oh man, well, you know, we've learned a load of stuff about this woman Ophelia. You might have heard of her. I don't know if you've done Hamlet. Anyway, and how she's a bit mad. Hamlet himself, he's a bit crazy too. Yeah, loads of people have done stuff on this. Hey, wow, but what about the grave digger, for example? And there's a guy in Hamlet who digs a grave, he doesn't come up for very long. It might well be that if you kind of had a look around the scholarship on the subject, you'd find that not many people had written about the grave digger and madness. And that would be the thing for me, where I would say at the beginning of my essay something like, although there's been a lot of work done on Ophelia's madness, and then I'd have a reference, and it would say, see, for example, this person, and also a lot of work done on Hamlet and his relationship with madness. Here's another reference. Very little work has been done on the grave digger. And instantly, everyone's interested. You're doing something new, you're doing something different. You're creating originality through your references to secondary literature. And something that my students always worry about, and you won't stop worrying about it at any point in your life, something that my students are always worrying about is whether your check that something is original or not is actually accurate. How can you know that someone else hasn't had that idea? If you claim that no one's written much about the gravedigger, what if you just missed a kind of 10-volume series of books on the gravedigger in Hamlet or something like that? We're always worrying about this. And the bottom line is that I have that problem just as much as you. For all I know, I might be writing about something in my own specialist area, medieval English. Might be writing a brilliant article about this Anglo-Saxon poem, Beowulf. I'll be like, no one's had this idea before. I'll look around the literature, I won't see it anywhere. For all I know, there might be a master's dissertation written in Japanese, might have been done 20 years ago, it's not on the internet, it's in a language I don't speak, that's had all my ideas. And I just can't know. But I have to participate in this rhetorical game where we create originality by saying that we're original. And so I'm inviting you to participate in that game as well. Okay, I'm just going to pause to collect my thoughts. And also, how have I been going for 20 minutes?
About 20. 23, 24.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, right, so that's quite a lot. Good. Well, in that case, yes, that's cool. So, yeah, good. I'll just do my last chunk then. Yeah. So that's me setting my stall. That's fundamentally what you're trying to do with secondary literature, showing that you're doing something different in a way that's verifiable by me as the reader. I can check the validity of the claims you're making. And ultimately, of course, the validity of your claims will come back to the primary literature. It might be that you've got some brilliant idea about Hamlet. It might be it's consistent with some brilliant idea that someone else has had about A Midsummer Night's Dream. So you might mention them as kind of giving general support for your idea. But ultimately, you've got to bring me back to Hamlet itself and have a really close look at the words in Hamlet to convince me that you're reading the text in a way that's kind of more compelling than other readings that might be out there. Students really often feel they can only possibly give one argument, because otherwise, if they give other possibilities, I'll kind of see the cracks in their approach. But actually, I really like it if students say to me, yeah, we could read Hamlet like this, or possibly like this, and both these ideas are possible, and give me kind of sensible discussions of that before saying, but I think it's this because. And you always come back to the primary literature. That's ultimately where knowledge comes from in English literature. So how do we do this in terms of day-to-day stuff, giving you actually a bit of advice about how to find this stuff? Well, it's harder in English literature than it is, say, in English language. In English language, scholars tend to be quite technologically literate. They tend to put their articles online, so it's quite easy for you to kind of get hold of them for free. English literature is a lot slower than that. It's just one of the kind of sad things about being in a kind of, I don't know, discipline that's still stuck in the 20th century. Even so, if I was going to find out anything about anything, I would, oops, do that again. Even so, if I was going to find out anything about anything, I would start by going to www.scholar.google.com. Not normal google.com, because that just opens up the whole of the internet and all the crazinesses that it contains, but scholar.google.com. Google subscribe to all the academic journals, which is amazing, and they're fully searchable. You'll find cool stuff if you put in, for example, Hamlet and Madness, or Emma, Jane Austen and Money. You'll find all sorts of references to cool stuff through that. Some of it you'll be able to access directly because it's been digitised as part of Google Books. Some of it you won't be able to access because your school or college doesn't subscribe to the relevant journal, and that's just a real pain. You just can't get around that, unless maybe you go and visit a university, look in some of their collections or something like that. Conceivably, your college might subscribe to JSTOR, Journal Store, which does contain a lot of this material and is really useful if you can get at it. Even so, a good nose around scholar.google.com will produce at least some material put online by people like me, where we make our articles available free access to anyone, including yourself. And so you can kind of use this to really get a sense of how much has been written on gravediggers and madness in Hamlet. If you put a search into here and it doesn't turn much up, it means there probably isn't that much out there. So you are actually in a better position than like anyone ever before in the whole history of the world to get a sense of what's been done and what hasn't, just through this kind of amazing website. So that's where I'd set you off to get started, finding the secondary literature, finding what's out there and what's not, and then kind of getting some of it on board. And my students, my students often feel that they have to read a load of stuff so that they kind of know the field before they can go away and write an essay about it. And that sometimes works for them. Again, I suspect it often comes from this kind of A-level idea of having to plan your essay. You give your plan to the teacher, they say yes, they give it back, you write the essay. If that works for you, then great, and it may have to work for you because it may be how your teachers force you to do it. But I'd encourage you to think about the idea of, as well, of writing your own stuff, getting your own thoughts moving, and then looking to see what other people have done on similar things by putting in those keywords of the thoughts that you've had into things like scholar.google.com. You might find you've got a paragraph where someone has done the idea already, and at that point you can just cut the paragraph, save yourself some words, and kind of say, as Hall has brilliantly argued, whatever. Or you could just put the argument and then just have a footnote, and it would say, Hall, my article about Hamlet 2006, or whatever. So you might find that you do some thinking, and you find that you can actually just save some words by sending people off to other sources later. But as you think, you'll also find that you'll write a paragraph, and then you'll find someone else who kind of says something really different from that paragraph, and then you can start to set up a debate with that scholar. You can say, well, I came to this topic thinking this, for these rational reasons, going back to the primary text. But Alaric argued this, or Hall argued this, from some other perspective. He was thinking of these particular details in the primary text. Always bring it back to the primary text. And then you can kind of, again, come to some rational reason why you're right, I'm right, you're both right, or maybe there's even a third reading out there that you hadn't thought of before and I hadn't thought of, but now that you've thought your own thoughts and read me, you've now kind of moved on to a third point. Yeah, I'd encourage you to try out this idea of thinking, writing, reading, thinking, writing, reading, and kind of having a dialogue with the secondary literature. And hopefully that will help you to set up this idea of yourself contributing to an ongoing discussion, not being a random Vincent van Gogh out there in the wilderness where no one cares, but being someone who's kind of speaking to issues that other people in the field are thinking about, speaking to scholars as an equal, which is ultimately what we're asking you to do, and engaging with their ideas. So those are some thoughts on how to deal with the critics. The critics aren't actually a kind of football team or a band, a bunch of kind of old men looking out there. They're scattered all over the internet. Many of them are going to be accessible to you. You can kind of get at their ideas, cite them, but don't just quote chunks, and use them to develop your own dialogue with a whole world of scholarship. good luck, and I hope I hope you get on all right with this advice, and that your teachers don't just go, no, don't do it like that, just cite 5 things and you'll be fine. That's me.